Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever found yourself walking in a big crowd and feeling like you are always bumping into people in the same way or always turning in a particular direction? Well, today we're diving into a fascinating study that might just explain why. This paper talks about a curious observation: when people walk around in an open space, especially in a crowd, they tend to move in a counterclockwise direction. Think about it. Have you ever noticed that yourself, or maybe you always steer left when you are just milling about? It seems like a small thing, right? But this study by Hart and his colleagues showed that this counterclockwise movement is super consistent. It happens across different cultures, and it looks like it is more about each person's own tendency, rather than the group steering itself. But here is the real puzzle. Why? The original researchers didn't have a clear answer, and that is where our story really begins. Now, most of us might think this is just a random quirk, or maybe something about how we react to other people. But two smart folks, Sergio Della Sala and Robert D. McIntosh, came along and said, hold on a minute, there might be a deeper reason rooted in how our brains work. They proposed an explanation based on something called pseudoneglect. So, what on earth is pseudoneglect? Imagine someone has had a stroke that affects their right brain. They might start ignoring the left side of space. It is like their left side is neglected. This is called hemispatial neglect. Now, pseudoneglect is like a much milder, everyday version of this for most people. It means we have a slight natural tendency to pay a little more attention to the left side of space. This right hemisphere dominance for spatial processing is thought to be the key, because our right hemisphere is particularly good at handling spatial information and generally controls our attention to the left side. We get this subtle leftward bias. You can see pseudoneglect in simple lab tests. If you ask someone to draw a line right in the middle of another line, they'll often draw it a little bit to the left. It shows up in other tasks too, like judging how many things are in a group or how bright something is. It's even been seen in how our pupils react to light. This isn't just about looking though. Pseudoneglect was first discovered even when people couldn't see, when they were blindfolded and had to bisect a rod by touch. It can even happen when we're just thinking or imagining things. The authors believe it is not really about culture or what side we read from, though those things might influence it a bit. The deep reason is likely this right brain dominance for how we pay attention to space. Our brains are wired so that each side pays more attention to the opposite side of our body. And because the right hemisphere is a bit stronger at this overall spatial attention game, we naturally lean left. This isn't just some academic idea. Pseudoneglect actually affects how we move around and even how we set up our spaces. Think about searching for something in a busy scene, or even how artists arrange things in a painting. This leftward bias plays a role. Ever notice people choosing seats on the left side of an airplane? That might be pseudoneglect at work. And it turns out we tend to bump into things more frequently on our right side during everyday movement. This is because if you are veering slightly left, you are more likely to have interactions or bumps on your right. And here is where it gets really interesting. Studies have shown that these bumping patterns actually match up with how strongly people show pseudoneglect on other tasks. So the implication for those roaming pedestrians is pretty clear. If each person is constantly taking tiny steps with a slight bias to turn left over time and across many steps, that adds up to a general counterclockwise movement. It's like each individual is making a tiny left turn. And when many people do it together, the whole group appears to be swirling counterclockwise. This explains why the original study found the effect was individual. It is not that the group is planning to go left. It is that each person's brain is subtly guiding them that way without them even realizing it. The authors of this new explanation point out that the original study tested some ideas about vision, like covering one eye. But pseudoneglect is more about how our brain hemispheres process space, not just what one eye sees. Even with one eye covered, the brain's internal processing of spatial attention is still there, influencing movement. So both studies agree that this counterclockwise movement is biologically based. The difference is in what biological basis they're pointing to. Hart colleagues explored a few possibilities, but Della, Sala, and McIntosh are specifically highlighting this well. Established concept of pseudoneglect, which comes from right hemisphere dominance for spatial attention. They believe this explanation based on pseudoneglect is strong, backed by lots of research, and can lead to new ways to test this idea. They're saying we should really look into this connection between how people walk in crowds and this subtle leftward bias in our brains. It is an area ripe for more research. So, what is my take on all this? I think this is a fantastic example of how science builds on itself. The original study identified a cool, observable phenomenon that was a bit of a mystery. And then, this followed. Our perspective, by looking at existing knowledge in neuropsychology, has provided a really plausible and, I think, elegant explanation. What I really love about this is how it bridges the gap between a seemingly trivial observation in everyday life. Why do crowds seem to swirl counterclockwise with very fundamental aspects of brain function? Like hemispheric dominance and spatial attention, it goes to show that even the most common behaviors can have deep psychological and neurological underpinnings. The strength of this explanation lies in the extensive research backing the concept of pseudoneglect. It is not a new idea pulled out of thin air. It is a well-studied phenomenon with evidence from various tasks and even neuroimaging studies. The fact that pseudoneglect has been linked to real-world behaviors like object search and even collision patterns makes it a very compelling explanation for pedestrian movement. However, like any good scientific idea, there is always more to explore. While the pseudoneglect explanation is strong, the original paper did explore other factors, and it is possible that multiple mechanisms contribute to the counterclockwise motion. Future research could try to directly test whether increasing or decreasing pseudoneglect experimentally affects the strength of this counterclockwise movement in pedestrian flow. They could also look at how factors like visibility, the speed of the crowd, and the size of the space might interact with this innate bias. Ultimately, this study invites us to think a little differently about our own movements and the movements of people around us. It suggests that our brains are constantly, subtly guiding our actions in ways we're not consciously aware of. It's a reminder that there is a whole universe of fascinating psychology happening just beneath the surface, influencing how we navigate the world one step at a time. What do you think about this explanation for counterclockwise motion? Have you ever noticed this yourself? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this dive into scientific explanations, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations into the mysteries of the human mind. We'll see you next time.